This is the Connected Leader. Really excited about being here with you today, and thanks for having me, and really looking forward to how God is going to grow you as a leader. My name is Ben Hjalmer. I'm from the Lakelands area in South Carolina, in Greenwood specifically, cover 4 counties around that area. I'm married to my best friend, Christina. We've been married 13 years, have 4 beautiful children, and today we're going to talk about what it means to be a connected leader. When I think about being a connected leader, I think about where I was in high school. And I played a lot of sports, but at the same time, I wasn't really great at everything. I kind of contributed and was able to do what I was able to do in order to help the team. And I remember one time I was a senior. I was second string wide receiver on the football team, and we had this All-American who was the #1 player in the entire country named Ricardo Hurley. Now, Ricardo would go on to play at the University of South Carolina. He was a good 6'6", 275-pound, all skin and muscle, not an ounce of fat. He could run a 4.4 40, so he was really, really fast, really strong, and you did not want to get in his way. He played linebacker, and any time that anybody were to go up against him, they would definitely feel the hurt. And I remember them being on defensive practice, and so the second string and third string guys would be, trying their best to confuse the defense and those kind of things. And I'll never forget the play that the offensive coordinator, his name was Chris Liner, he called the play 49 crack. 49 crack, and I knew that what that meant was the running back was going to come around and do a sweep, was what they called. It was kind of run around to the edge there. But the crack was for me as the receiver to go inside and to crack the linebacker. Now, as they were setting up, I was trying to be like, okay, who is the linebacker that I'm going to have to go and try my best to crack? And lo and behold, it was Ricardo Hurley. And I will never, ever forget what the offensive coordinator yelled out as loud as he possibly could before the play actually started. He said, "Ben, give it 100%, 100%. And so everybody's looking at me. They knew what that meant, and I was scared out of my bones. I knew that today was going to be the day of my death. And everybody was going to wonder, how in the world did this little football player be matched up with this big, man-child, if there was one? And so I go in, he connects eyes with me, and the next thing you know, I am flat on my back. It hurt. It hurt a lot. However, the running back did score, which was all that mattered, and all my teammates came to me, and congratulated me because I made the seal block on the linebacker. I was seeing stars, but at the end of the day, I knew that even though I was second string, I could still be a leader. And so let me just tell you something, whether you're the star athlete or the supportive athlete, you can be a leader. And you need to be a connected leader, that everything that you do should be 100%. As Jesus told his disciples, he says, you must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. He said the second is equally as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so he's like, love me and love your neighbor. Love God, love people, and do it with all of your heart, with all of your mind, strength, and soul. So what does it mean to be a connected leader? That no matter if you are the star athlete or the supportive athlete, what does it mean for you to be a connected leader? Let me just go ahead and say this up front. To be a connected leader, you cannot be a leader unless you're connected to people. You see, a leader is someone who influences other people. They have a connection with them. They have a relationship with them. If people are not following you, you are not a leader. And so when I think about a connected leader, this is what kind of my definition of what a connected leader looks like. A connected leader will seek to be all in all ways, at all times, to all people. Okay? They're going to be all in any way that they possibly can, anytime that they possibly can, to everyone that God has put in their path. And a guy that I really want all of us to kind of get to know a little bit more is a person that you have probably heard of before, and that is David, also known as King David. And you're probably thinking, okay, if there's a leader in the Old Testament, yes, it would be David. But let me just tell you something. From the time, that he was 13 years old, going to fight Goliath, we see that David is a leader. He is a leader among men. They're scared of Goliath, but he was not scared because he knew who his God was. And all throughout, from the time he killed Goliath, and until the time that he actually became the king of Israel, which was about 13 to 15 years after being ordained by Samuel to do so, we see David all throughout little pieces and parts of 1st and 2nd Samuel. Now, there came a time again that he became king of Israel, but he had finally, kind of gotten to this place of comfortableness, if there was. He kind of got to this place where, I could kind of just sit back. I pretty much have authority. People listen to me. People follow me. People do what I tell them to do. They don't ask questions. And we're going to find David getting into the situation where he disconnects from the people. He disconnects. And what we're going to see that whenever David became disconnected, it's going to lead to a deadly disaster. I don't think any of us would think that if you just simply disconnected from people, that could simply turn into a disaster for you, for others, for a large group of people. And so, what is it that we can learn from King David's life about being connected rather than disconnected? So a connected leader, I'm going to give you 4 things. We're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and 12. If you have a copy of Scripture, we're going to be going through a couple verses in those 2 chapters, 2 Samuel chapter 11 and 12. And I would love for you to follow along with me in your passage of Scripture. The very first thing when it comes to be a 100% connected leader is this. A connected leader is going to lead by example. They're going to lead by example. You lead people when they see and when they believe that your life is worth following, that people are watching you. They're watching everything that you do. They're watching everything you say, everything you do, the decisions that you make. And the people of Israel were looking at David's life in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Let's read verse 1. It says, "In the spring of the year, the time when kings," that's David, "go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem." There's a lot in that verse. And so King David was supposed to be rallying the troops, but instead he decided to remain in Jerusalem. Everybody knew that in the springtime, at this particular time, if there was battle, then the king was supposed to go. It was a known fact. But David, and we're going to see why here in just a little bit, David remained in Jerusalem. You see, a connected leader will most of the time, if not all the time, do what they're supposed to do and not do what they're not supposed to do. That's what a leader does. They lead by example. The things that are supposed to happen, they're going to make happen. The things that they need to stay away from, they stay away from, unless you decide, or unless a leader decides to stay away from those things. So let me ask you a question, athletes. Do you lead or are you lazy? David was lazy at this moment. And as we'll see, because of his laziness, he's going to lose. And he's going to lose big time. And other people are going to lose, both physically, spiritually, emotionally, as a country, etc. Are you lazy on the field? Are you lazy on the court? Just as David sent Joab to go and do his work, a work that he was supposed to be there to do you go send people to go do stuff for you, or do you do it yourself? You lead by example. You either lead or you're lazy. Which one are you? Do you send people to go and take care of your dirty work because you're, the big dog on campus or on the team? Or do you show that you are willing to do things that you're supposed to do and not get other people to do it? So the first thing, athletes, is lead by example. Number two, a 100% connected leader is unselfish. They are unselfish. Leaders are not supposed to be about themselves, but about other people. They think about other people's needs more than their own necessities. They could care less about them as long as it makes someone or another group better in the long run. But that wasn't the case for David. In this situation, he became selfish. It was all about David. It was whatever David wanted to do, he was going to do. We look at verses 2 through 5 of 2 Samuel chapter 11. It says, "It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house." So he was at his house on the roof. "That he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent," here he goes sending people again. So David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, somebody came up to him and says, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" And so David sent messengers and took her. And she came to him and he lay with her. Let me just go ahead and stop and say this right now. He had sex with another man's wife. Her name was Bathsheba. Her husband's name was Uriah. Uriah was at war. He was doing what he was supposed to do. David was supposed to be with them. But he was selfish and it was all about him. And so then she returned to her house after he lay with her. She returned to her house. In verse 5 it says, "And the woman conceived and she sent and told David, 'I am pregnant.'" And see, the reason that David didn't go to war was simply because of a woman. It's in my own personal opinion that I think that David had pre-planned this. This was premeditated. It wasn't like this was the first time and he by chance were to go up on the roof to see what was there. He knew who Bathsheba was. He knew who Uriah was. He knew where Uriah was going to be and he knew where Bathsheba was going to be. And guess what? He says, "I'm the king. I can have anybody come to me that I want to." And so she comes to him. She has sex with him. I believe he forced her to do that or coaxed her into doing that. And it was going to be really bad because she comes back and says, "Hey, King David, I am pregnant." And you see, here's the truth about sin. Because David had sinned. Here's the truth about sin. Sin usually starts with selfishness. It's all about me. It's all about what I want to do. And so when we get in this selfish mentality, that's when we sin the most. You see, the middle letter of the word sin is what? I. At the center of everything that you're about is I. I this. If I can gain from it, how can I benefit? But if we look at Paul and what he said to the church of Philippi, to the Philippians, in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, he says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility think of others as more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." And so you see, Paul is wanting for people to understand that it's not about them, that we need to put our preferences or even our own wants and desires to the side. You see, King David needed this verse, and guess what? We do too. We all need this verse. We all fall into selfish ways, but if you're a connected leader, you will leverage yourself for others. It's about making your teammates around you better. It's about showing people what it means to put a team on their shoulders to make the team better rather than an individual person to be better. So first, we lead by example. Number two, we're unselfish. Number three, a committed leader or connected leader, is going to be honest. They're going to be honest. So once Bathsheba became pregnant, David obtained the name that I like to give him as Deceitful David. That's all he did from then on, right? He lied and lied and lied. And he brought Uriah home. And he tried to get Uriah, as we're going to see here in a second, he tried to get Uriah to do something that Uriah was not about to do. And so we get to verse number 14, after David is trying to get Uriah to go and have sex with his wife so that he could cover up the sin of having sex with his wife. And maybe people now will think that the baby is actually Uriah's rather than King David's. But then we find that Uriah does not do that. He does not go and sleep with his wife because his men are at battle. And he's like, how dare I go back to the comfort of my home and to my wife when all these guys are out here battling? And so we finally get to verse 14, that whenever Uriah doesn't do what David asked him to do, verse 14 it says this, in the morning David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. Let me stop there. So David writes a letter. He says, Uriah, I need you to give this back to Joab whenever you go. In verse 15 it says, in the letter he wrote this. Here it is. Set Uriah on the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die. And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell, which means died. And it says Uriah the Hittite also died. You see, this is what we need to understand. Dishonesty could lead to death. That because David was trying to cover up his sin, to try to get Uriah to do something that Uriah was not going to do. Why? Because Uriah was a good man, a godly man, a good warrior, a good soldier. We see that David sent his own death letter with Uriah. So I give this to Joab. And the next thing you know, Uriah dies. Why? In order to cover up his sin. Sin many times starts with dishonesty. And in this case, it resulted from a man's death to happen. Solomon, when he was teaching his son what it meant to live life in a wise way. In Proverbs chapter 12, verse 22, it says, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are His delight. Let me ask you a question. Are you an honest person? Do you tell the truth? Whenever people aren't looking and when they're not around you, are you a person of integrity? That even if no one is looking, you realize, you know what, God's looking at me. God is going to know everything that you do, why you do it, how you do it, if you went about it the right way or the wrong way. Are you an honest person or a dishonest person? Are you a person of integrity? Or are you a foolish person and you try to get by and if nobody really knows about it, doesn't really hurt anybody? Oh, yes, it does. Sin hurts all people. And you want your teammates, to trust that you'll do what you say you'll do. And if you don't, it could lead to some major repercussions. And so if you find yourself not leading by example, you find yourself being unselfish and you find yourself not honest, there may come a time when you're called out for it. And when you're called out for it, and whoever calls you out, is it going to lead to number 4, and that's this: accept responsibility. Listen to me. A connected leader is always going to accept responsibility. They're going to take it. They're going to say, it's my bad. My fault. I should have done it another way. But a lot of people are not like that. So people in David's camp find out about David. They find out about the situation. They see that Uriah has died. They probably have learned from Joab that David told him to put Uriah at the front lines. And it finally comes to the ears of a man named Nathan. Now, Nathan was a prophet. Nathan only spoke for God. And Nathan didn't care what people had to say. Nathan was willing to die. But Nathan was all about the Lord. He spoke truth to him. And Nathan in 2 Samuel chapter 12, we're going to see Nathan coming up with a story. And basically the story is this. You can read it in quite a few verses there in the first part of chapter 12. It's basically this story. Hey, there's a guy that's a rich guy and he's got a lot of lambs. He's fruitful, he's rich, he's got everything he ever needed. But then on the other side of the street, you got this guy that is poor. He's got one little lamb. And he has brought this little lamb up since that lamb was a baby, and he's taking care of that lamb. And this rich guy comes over and he steals this little bitty lamb. And what do you think about that, David? And David, man, he is like fuming hot. He's like, that guy deserves to die. How dare him? He had everything that he could ever want. But he decided to go and to steal this one little lamb that this guy had poured his life into and take it. And so Nathan comes to him, tells the story. He's angry. And then we read this. Look at verse number 7 of 2 Samuel 12. It says, Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel. And I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms. And gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and have taken his wife to be your wife and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house. I read a little bit longer there, but basically he says, hey, the guy that I just explained, that's you. You have everything, and you went and stole this man's wife, and you had this guy killed. So how does David respond? This is where I believe David comes back and is known as a man after God's own heart because of this transformation in David's heart in this moment. Verse 13. So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die. Nevertheless, because of this deed, you have utterly scorned the Lord. The child who is born to you shall die. Then Nathan went to his house. So when David was called out by Nathan, he accepted responsibility and he confessed it. Listen to me, athletes, teammates. Let me just tell you something. You're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. And get this. You're even going to make some dumb decisions. And you know what? That's okay. And it's fine. But when your coach or when your teammate comes and calls you out for it, how are you going to respond? You going to downplay it? Oh man, that wasn't really that big of a deal. Are you going to blame? Well, if they would have done that, then I wouldn't have done that. Leaders don't do that. Are you going to retaliate? You know what? You're no better than I am, and I will whoop your tail. Or, you start going off on different people. How are you going to respond? You can blame. You can downplay it. You can deny it. You can retaliate. Or guess what? You can accept responsibility. Take ownership. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, that's my bad. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. Leaders will always make it right. That's what leaders do. That's what makes them a leader. And so when you make bad grades, I kind of give two words that start with the letter C as we close today. And that's this. If you make bad grades, confess it and correct it. If you make a bad decision on a play with your team, confess it, correct it. If you make an error on the ball field and it causes your team to lose the game or the championship, confess it, corrected. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, but are you going to accept responsibility? That's what it means to be 100% connected leader. And so now, it's your turn. As we often say when we start a race, on your mark, get set, go. And as you go, please know that I'm praying for you. And let's end with prayer. Father, thank you so much for the example of Christ, who was the only perfect person to ever live on earth. And God, because of His perfect life, He died the perfect death for imperfect people like me and like every athlete or whoever's watching this today. That because of His perfection, we don't have to be perfect. However, we are to strive. We're to strive to lead by example. We're to strive to be unselfish with our time and with our talents, that we build other people up and be selfless rather than selfish. God, I pray that you would to help us to gain strength from you, and that when we mess up and when we drop the ball, and maybe when we become dishonest or we don't give it 100%, God, I pray that you would help us to take responsibility and to confess it and to correct it, as we'll be doing that our entire life. And so, God, I pray for these athletes that you would help them to do that. And we pray all these things in the powerful and precious name of Christ. Amen. Thank you guys for being here. Really hope that you were able to glean some things about being a connected leader. I'm Ben Hjalmer. Really hope to see you soon. God bless you and Godspeed.